This week on Lightning Radio's Power Play.
Another Winter Olympics has come and gone, and for American hockey fans, unfortunately there's no gold medal to be had from the men's team. And while the women's U.S. national team will celebrate their gold for the next 4 years, for the men, the gold-less drought will extend to 42 years. That means if you want that gold medal feeling again, you have to channel the 1980 games in Lake Placid. And we all remember what they sounded like.
1-0 Russia with 6:01 to play in the first period. Here comes Schneider. Score!
Wait, that's what it sounded like? Where's Al Michaels and Ken Dryden? Where's Do You Believe in Miracles? That may not be how you remember the Miracle on Ice game between the Americans and the Soviets, but that's how Curt Chaplin remembers it, as he called the game on a tape recorder in Lake Placid as a reporter for ABC Sports. On this edition of the Power Play podcast, we talked to Chaplin about how he ended up with the other call of the Miracle on Ice, how it helped him in his lengthy broadcast career, and how it even got him into the Hockey Hall of Fame. An impossible dream that came true for a 26-year-old kid looking for his own assignment at arguably the greatest sports moment of the 20th century. That's next when the Power Play podcast continues in just 30 seconds.
A team and its fans feed off one another.
Here's Stamkos getting to the puck.
Your energy inspires effort, and the team does its best to return the favor. Moment by moment, the cycle continues, with each electrifying outburst providing the inspiration for the next. The Tampa Bay Lightning. Be the Thunder. This Tuesday, Lightning versus Senators, 7:30 p.m. Tickets at tampabaylightning.com.
This is Lightning Radio's Power Play. Here's your host, Matt Salmon.
Back in late February, as the Winter Olympics were going on, I got that itch. I tend to get it on or about every February 22nd. That's the anniversary of the U.S. Olympic men's hockey team defeating the Soviets 4-3 to advance to the gold medal game against Finland. Now, I was a toddler when that game was actually played, but throughout my childhood and early adulthood, I came to understand very quickly how important that game and the gold medal won by the team meant not only to the sport of hockey in America, but to the emotions and the conscience of America heading into the 1980s and beyond. 2 movies were made from that event. Careers on and off the ice were boosted, and a bar was set for all other men's hockey teams in the Olympics ever since, and it's yet to be topped. So there I was, doing work and looking for that infamous game on YouTube to have on in the background. And that's when I found a YouTube clip posted in 2006, promoting a quote-unquote recently surfaced recording of the Miracle on Ice. Listening to it, I knew it wasn't just a mock play-by-play performance. You could tell it was from 1980, with a young voice filled with energy, breathlessly yet professionally describing the action at hand. As it would turn out, it was a reporter from ABC Sports who, sensing something special was going to happen, brought a tape recorder and 3 cassette tapes with him to the hockey rink in Lake Placid on February 22, 1980. It would be this reporter's only play-by-play experience calling a hockey game on tape, although it would be far from his last experience in broadcasting. That 26-year-old reporter was Curt Chaplin. Now that name may ring a bell, and certainly his voice will if you've watched any television in the last 25 or so years. That would be daytime television.
What's your feeling on the outcome here?
I feel good. I feel good about it. It's okay.
You pretty much said that you stole the camera or took it or whatever, however you want to say that, right?
It ended up in the car.
Yeah.
Or more in-depth documentaries at night.
A 144-game season was hastily scheduled. Baseball in 1995 would begin at the end of April, following an abbreviated and delayed spring training.
Chaplin's resume speaks volumes. A sports reporter and morning show sidekick in New York City throughout the late 70s and 1980s, a television voiceover artist on MLB Network, Cartoon Network, and also he was the guy in the hallway, for a lack of a better job description, on the People's Court for 19 years. But Chaplin will admit there's one event in his career that in the hearts and minds of many people, and in particular hockey fans, Well, one event rises above all of that. He was in the right place and the right time for one of the greatest moments in sports history. And he has that proof in the tapes he found in his attic several years ago. After a few Twitter DMs and voicemails, I was finally able to track down Chaplin, who was thrilled to tell his story of that game. But he's also dealing with some tough times. He's a recovering New York Rangers fan, and he's watching quite a few of the players he once rooted for, now wearing the Lightning sweater in Tampa Bay.
I thought it's a great trade, I thought, really for both teams. Tampa gets two of the finest players off the Ranger roster. McDonough speaks for himself. You can't find a better, tougher, better leader than him. And as far as JT Miller goes, man, that guy will go into any corner. He will go up against anybody. He's passionate. He's like another Callahan. It's like you got another Callahan there. And so I think they're going to help. I think they're going to help immensely. And I don't know. I don't want to jinx anything, but I don't see a better team than Tampa right now.
Now, before we get to February 22nd, 1980 in particular, I just want to go back 12, 13 years ago, and that's just based on the timestamp from YouTube when I found the recordings that you had posted up there and had matched with video. These were quote-unquote long-lost cassette tapes that got unearthed. So what spring cleaning adventures led to you finding these tapes and letting them see the light of day for the first time in a very, very long time?
Spring cleaning, you're right on the money. That's exactly what happened. I went up into the attic space here and found in a little plastic box. I had set them aside. They were buried under a bunch of other memorabilia, and they were connected. They were a rubber band that had long since disintegrated was wrapped around these 3 cassette tapes, and they were marked period 1, period 2, and period 3. And I said, oh, man, there it is. These tapes contain my call of the Miracle on Ice in the arena that day in 1980. I have to do something with these things. First thing I have to do is find a cassette player to play them on, because those had gone out of, where do you find a cassette player anymore? Where do you find an 8-track player, anymore? That kind of technology had gone by the wayside. But I did find one. Unfortunately, the tapes did play back, and so at that point, it was a decision of what to do with them.
So at that point, too, these tapes would have been about 25 years old, so in remarkably good shape. Whatever environmental setup you had them languishing in for 25 years, you picked the right one there, other than the poor rubber band. But I would imagine, first of all, you had the shock of, these are the tapes. And then were you just kind of flooded with some general memories of that particular day and what happened and what you experienced?
Well, as I played them back, yes. As I played them back and heard myself I'll give away my age. Let's see, that day in 1980, I was about 26 years old. And I'd never called a full hockey game before. Although I was a big hockey fan, I knew how to do it, and I did it. And as I played them back, I heard this 26-year-old version of myself calling this hockey game, and it was compelling, and it was exciting. And as the thing dwindled down to the third period and down to the final few minutes, the goosebumps were rising, and the hair on the neck was rising. And I knew that I had something there that would appeal, appeal to the emotions of all hockey fans. And so the thing to do was find the video of that game against USA-Russia, which was not the gold medal game, by the way, and lay my call over the top of it and see how it sounded. And man, I was able to take just a 9-minute piece of it and put it up on YouTube just to test it, and I think it has about 800,000 hits right now. So people responded tremendously. I don't want to be compared to Al Michaels. I'm a different person and at the end of it, I didn't say, of course, do you believe in miracles? Yes. I said something else, but I was a different person bringing a different experience of the entire game, including the ending and the post-game celebration on the ice, to the microphone, And I was a tremendous hockey fan. I knew what I was talking about, and so it brings a brand new, fresh, and different experience to the listener. Even if you love the Al Michaels call, which everyone does, and you can recite it in your sleep, you still want to hear this new, fresh, different version to give you a new experience of what you thought you knew everything about. You really don't. There's a whole world out there of experience, and everybody experienced it differently.
Curt Chaplin, who had a call of the 1980 medal round game between the U.S. men's hockey team and the Soviet Union, joining us here on the Power Play podcast. Before we talk about the game, let's set the stage here. First of all, from a national standpoint, for people who are too young to know, why was this particular game such a key in the psyche of America in the winter of 1980? Because as Jimmy Carter famously said, there was a crisis of confidence going on through the nation, and that was putting it lightly. I mean, the nation had been through so much. It needed something positive to grab, and this was the moment. This was the event.
Yeah, the 70s was a crazy decade. Every decade seems to be crazy. The 60s were crazy. But the 70s were, coming out of the 60s, the 70s were a decade of sort of, the country was crumbling a little bit. You're speaking politically and economically right now, to set the stage there for all Americans from coast to coast, north to south, east to west. There were gas lines. You had to wait on line to get gas. There were gas shortages. Carter was president. Our status in the world was weakening. There were hostages being held in Iran at that time, at the time the game was played. The country was depressed in its state of mind. It was depressed. We were being pushed around by the oil barons and in the Middle East, and by the Iranians holding our hostages, and we were kind of we felt powerless and helpless at that time. And of course, we didn't know what we were looking at coming up in the 80s. Was it going to get worse? More of the same? Where were we headed? And the country was in a very low morale. The morale was low in this country at that point, and that's when the U.S. kids skated out against the Russian team. That was the setting, economically and politically. Not athletically and Olympically. That's a whole different story, setting. But as far as how the country was faring at that time, it was really at a low ebb.
And speaking of athletically and Olympically, just a couple of weeks before the Winter Olympics started in Lake Placid, President Carter announced that the United States was not going to participate in the Summer Olympics in Moscow because of the Russians invading Afghanistan the previous year. And the United States was one of several nations that decided not to participate. So that also casts a pall over everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It did. There were big questions about, like I said, where we were headed and what we were doing. It was a very confusing, difficult, complicated moment in time for the United States. And Olympically speaking, we didn't even know what our future was there. Was this the last time we were going to, be in the Olympics? No, nobody knew what we were headed for.
And I'm sure 26-year-old Curt Chaplin had no idea what he was heading for, or maybe he did. What were you doing at this time, and how did you find your way inside the ice arena at Lake Placid for this particular game?
Your segues are fantastic.
Thank you.
I gotta add it. It's so great.
I've had lots of coffee today to kind of prepare myself.
26-year-old Curt Chaplin did not know what he was heading for. He knew where he was. He knew what he wanted to do. But of course, nobody knew what was about to happen. I was assigned. I was working for ABC Radio Network Sports at that time. Now, the Al Michaels call came about because he was ABC television, and ABC had the rights to the 1980 Winter Olympics, radio and TV. So I was on the radio side with the radio network. And on the radio network, that meant people like Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford and people like that did 5-minute network shows. Each one had their own show. Cosell, for instance, did Howard Cosell, speaking of sports, every afternoon at 4:15 Eastern Time. And his show would go on to 500 stations around the country. Gifford would come on after that at 4:25 and do a show that would be on 300, 400, 500 stations, and Keith Jackson would do one. Okay, so each guy had their own radio show, sportscast. My job as a reporter for the ABC team was to cover games and get sound bites, get down in the locker room after the games, get the players, the kind of stuff that all your listeners are used to seeing and hearing on TV and radio nowadays. That was my job. But unfortunately, that day, February 22nd, I was assigned to cover, I think it was bobsled. And this game was going on. Now, I knew about it. I knew about the Russian team. I had studied the Russian team for years leading up to this game. I was at the Madison Square Garden exhibition 2 weeks before where they had beaten the U.S. 10-3. I was there at that one. I knew every name. I knew every number on that team. I knew everything about that Russian team because I was a big fan of that team. They were amazing. They were incredible. They were unbeatable. Their style had never been seen before. Any hockey fan had to admire that team, the way they played. So now the game is happening, and I'm assigned to bobsled. Are you kidding me? Matt, I'm not going to bobsled when that game's taking place. If I was at bobsled, that would have been being in the wrong place at the right time if I had gone to bobsled.
I think you'd be hating yourself 42 years later.
Oh, yeah. I don't think being in the wrong place at the right time is good for anybody's career. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be in the right place at the right time. And so I just insisted to the sports director. I just begged him and begged him and begged him to assign me the hockey game. And finally he said, well, all right. And he sent me the hockey game. I got the assignment. And there I was. So now I find myself in the arena. It's game time. I don't have a spot in the press box. To my left, about 10 feet, there's Al Michaels with Ken Dryden right there. So I just huddled underneath an ABC television camera, which was the only spot in the stands I could find where I could do play-by-play into my tape recorder and not bother anybody. I didn't want the person next to me to hear it. Plus, I didn't even know if it was going to be any good, so I didn't want anybody to hear what I was doing. So I just huddled underneath this television camera, just outside the press box, and got set to cover the game. Can I tell you one more thing about coverage? As a sports reporter, I used to cover games in New York City all the time. Well, every night I was at the Knicks, the Rangers, the Yankees, whatever it is. And if the game would come down to a climactic moment, let's say a last shot for a Knick game, I would roll my tape, do play-by-play of that moment into my tape recorder, and that way the next day, if the guys wanted that call, if it was a big shot and a big make, and if they wanted to use a little play-by-play of it, there I had it. I had the play-by-play. 9 times out of 10, they used other aspects of the coverage. But that was a feature of my coverage as a reporter. I did that.
So your call wasn't a live radio call. Do you remember who did the radio call for ABC?
Yes, Don Chevrier.
The great Don Chevrier.
The great Don Chevrier did. And he was a great hockey broadcaster, and he did the Toronto Blue Jays also back in those days. And Chevrier is a Canadian citizen and a great hockey fan. He could call a hockey game, boy. Oh, is he great.
Yeah.
And so he did the radio call. Nobody ever heard it.
Yeah. And
Don Michaels got done.
For those longtime residents of Tampa Bay, you may have actually heard Don Chevrier. As you mentioned, he was a Toronto Blue Jays TV play-by-play announcer. I was a Blue Jays fan as a kid, and there was a local TV station that picked up the broadcast rights. This is the late 80s, early 90s. And they cleared mostly weekend games. So I was fortunate to to catch Don Chevrier, doing wonders as a baseball announcer. And he, unfortunately, he passed away several years ago, but he was just a legend in the business.
Oh yeah, he was part of the ABC team also. That's Chevy. That's my buddy Chevy. Yeah, and as a young kid there, 25, 26 years old, he was the kind of person I was learning under guys like him. Chevy, Cosell, and these other names I mentioned. And what a team! What a roster of talent for a guy like me to be working under. So these guys like Chevy took me under his wing and taught me the business. I was very fortunate in that sense.
All right, let's shift to the game here. There was this sense of excitement. People knew that it was more than a hockey game. As we mentioned, it was this one positive thing, in so many aspects, not just in sports, but pretty much everything else. The previous 25 years, the Soviets had beaten us to, with Sputnik and, getting a man into space and everything else. Okay, we landed on the moon first, but there was this constant back and forth and race with the Soviets. So there's a buzz in the building as the game is starting to unfold. What do you recall from especially that first period?
Well, I started my tape recorder prior to the opening face-off, not thinking that I was going to do the whole game. The reason I started it right there was because, as I said, I always wanted to have the climactic moment on tape just in case the guys wanted it. Well, I figured, what if the puck drops? The Soviets take it straight in and score right away in the first 10 seconds, and the final score is 1-0. Well, I better have that. I don't know when the goal's going to get scored. I don't know what's going to happen. So I started my tape recorder just as Mikhailov and Mark Johnson skated to center ice for the opening faceoff. I started my tape recorder, and as it turns out, I kept it going the whole way.
Flanagan and Strobel for the U.S. coming out to take the faceoff. The puck is dropped. Soviets in control. Kharlamov with a pass to the center ice zone, which Petrov shoots in. Morrow is back there for the United States. Karam's one around to the far side, kept in. A centering feed is sticked aside by Craig, and over to the near boards it comes, picked up by the Americans.
Listen, nobody knew it was going to be the Miracle on Ice. Nobody knew that. It wasn't the Miracle on Ice until Mark Johnson at the 19:59.5 mark of the first period.
15 seconds to go in the period, and it's cleared out. Morrow's got to come back into his own zone to get it with 10-9 now left in the period. A drop pass for Christian with 6 seconds. Comes to the red line and shoots one in. Off the pads! Here's Johnson! He scores! It's good with no time left on the clock! Mark Johnson! No time left on the clock! It's going to count! The U.S. ties the game 2-2! And the Soviets are banging their sticks on the ice. A poor play by goalie Tretiak, who let that rebound come right out in front. It was Mark Johnson who swooped in and shot it behind him. The game is tied 2-2. And that's the end of the first period.
Tretiak misread the clock. He figured I just have to make this last save and that's it, buzzer. But there were 2.5 more seconds left, and the puck came off his pads, and Johnson had time to swoop in there and bury the rebound on him to tie the game 2-2 at the end of the first period. That was a shocking moment. That's when everybody started to believe that something remarkable could be happening in the arena that day.
And then what was even more shocking, as the teams come out in the second period, Ladislav Tretiak isn't in net. It's Vladimir Mishkin. How much of a shock was that for you, the announcer? As you mentioned, you'd seen this team before, and you knew it front and back. One of the greatest goaltenders in the world is now sitting on the bench in a 2-2 game.
Shocking is not the word for it. It was inexplicable was the word for it.
Well, all right, a 2-2 hockey game going into the second period. And in the intermission, the Russians have replaced starting goaltender Vladislav Tretiak with Phil Mishkin.
There was no announcement in the arena. You had to just figure it out for yourself what was going on. It's the Soviets, and everything is mysterious and everything has double meanings. And so all of a sudden, the second period's about to begin, and I glance over into the crease, and it's Phil Mishkin. And so I mentioned that right away in my call of the game, and Tretiak has been replaced by Phil Mishkin. Nobody knew if he was injured or no one knew the circumstances. But as it turns out, from Jonathan Hawk's documentary, 30 for 30 documentary that he did with Fetisov, it was explained that like the KGB or something marched into the dressing room between periods after that tying goal by Johnson. The Soviets were very upset. The ranking officers and the president of the country, they were very upset. And they marched into the dressing room and they ordered the coach, Tikhonov, to remove Tretiak, to punish him, and put Mishkin in there. So Tikhonov didn't make that decision. I think the KGB or something made that decision for him.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that the Russian team in 1980, and this speaks for the team in previous decades and up through the late 80s, they weren't a bunch of college kids or professional athletes. They were soldiers. They were part of the Soviet army. So, yeah, it wasn't just an extension. It wasn't just an athletic club. These were soldiers, and there were marching orders going well above Tikhonov with his team.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely right. And they were used to winning, and they did not like being embarrassed by that goal, that tying goal, or the mistake. You know, they had won something, the previous 6 Olympic gold medals. I think they had won something, a couple of 36 games in a row. They never lost. Even against an NHL team, they never lost. And to see that goal go in the way it did, and to see the American crowd come alive in that arena the way it did at that point, I think energized those, the KGB and energized the Soviets in a negative way. They did not like seeing the American fans excited and optimistic. And so they made that change, and there's Phil Mishkin starting the second period in a 2-2 game.
And while Tikhonov would later say it was the biggest mistake of his career, and as you said that perhaps he was influenced to make the call, the Soviets responded, though. In the second period, they outshot the U.S. 12-2. They actually took a 3-2 lead off the power play early in the second period.
Right.
So let's fast forward to the third. It's 3-2, and did you have this foreboding sense of, we'll chalk this up as another Soviet win? Or deep down inside, after watching 40 minutes of the game, did you think, this team still has a chance? If they can just find a way to get one past Mishkin, it's a whole new game.
Think about it, Matt. 40 minutes down, 20 minutes to go. We're headed to the third period, and the score was only 3-2. That's the way I looked at it. Most people thought it would be 8-1 by that point. But the second period ended, and they only got that one goal in the second period. And the second period comes to a close, and you can hear in my voice.
The second period with the score, Russia 3 and the United States 2.
It's like they're right in this game. They're one shot away from tying this game up. So the excitement was building at that point. Going into the third, the excitement was definitely building in this play-by-play announcer's delivery. I was ready. I think the miracle was starting to happen, Like the stage was set now. Just maybe. Let's wait and see. That's how it felt after 2.
The furious finish in the third period, the anticlimactic gold medal game, and how being there in that moment has helped Curt Chaplin spread the message of opportunity to future broadcasters. That's next when the Power Play podcast continues in just 30 seconds.
See Jeff Dunham's all-new show, Passively Aggressive. Sunday, April 29, 3 p.m., Amalie Arena.
I am angry because Facebook won't let me on Facebook. Because you're a terrorist? No, because I don't have a face! That's good, that's good, that's good!
Tickets on sale now at the McDonald's ticket office at Amalie Arena, Ticketmaster.com, or by phone at 800-745-3000. Don't miss them, Tampa. Jeff Dunham, Passively Aggressive.
Lightning Radio's Power Play continues. Here's your host, Matt Salmon.
Welcome back to the Power Play podcast on Lightning Radio. We're talking with Curt Chaplin, known by many people for his role on The People's Court or his voiceover work for various productions. But we're talking about his recording of The Miracle on Ice from February 22nd, 1980. It's a recording that even he forgot he had up until several years ago, but eventually would find its way to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. So the third starts and Vladimir Krutov sent to the penalty box at 6:47. Here comes Mark Johnson as the power play is about to expire. What do you recall from that particular moment?
Well, when Krutov took the penalty, was it Krutov? Yeah, he took the penalty, right? Mm-hmm. He took the penalty on John Harrington in the offensive zone. He just chopped him down for no reason. It was what we would call a dumb penalty in hockey parlance, right? There was no reason for it, especially in a 3-2 game in the third period. And so when he took the penalty, again, I realized that this could be this is it. It's setting up to happen. Something is setting up now. So the power play begins. And you're right, it went right down to the final seconds of the power play. And what I remember is, and this could be the last, they were clearing the puck, they were doing a good job killing. U.S. picked the puck up behind their net with about 10 seconds to go, 11, 12 seconds on the power play. And this could be the last opportunity on this power play for the U.S.
19 seconds to go in the power play, 11:29 in the game, and this could be the last opportunity on this power play for the U.S. Here they come. Silk, a centering pass, score! Mark Johnson on the pass from Silk. It's a tie hockey game. Who would have believed it? The entire U.S. team comes off the bench to congratulate Mark Johnson, who has just scored his second goal of the game. It's a power play goal. Dane Silk will get the assist. And the United States could be on the verge of the biggest upset in recent Olympic history. United States 3, Russia 3, in what is shaping up as one of the big moments in these 13th games here at Lake Placid.
Now everybody is pulling their hair out. Now everyone's scared out of their wits because we might win this game, and now it's nuts, absolutely nuts in the arena. About 12 minutes to go.
And if it's nuts when it's tied 3-3 about 90 seconds later, and I've actually stood on the ice at this particular point. I'll tell that story later. Mike Eruzione, top of the right circle, midway point of the third period. The roof almost literally got blown off by what happened here.
Well, Pavlich goes into the corner, into the left wing corner, and fights for the puck over there. And the puck took a crazy hop up into the air and landed kind of in the middle of the ice in an open space where there really was no one around. And Eruzione was the first one to the puck. So there he is. He's about 20 feet straight in front of Michigan, and he's got a shot. And I think I started screaming at that point. Before the puck even came off his stick, I started screaming because in a 3-3 game with 10 minutes to go against the Soviet Union, to have that kind of a scoring opportunity stare you right in the face, it's like time stopped. And I have a frozen picture of Eruzione skating onto the puck. I think the puck stayed on his stick for less than a second. He just skated right onto it and let it go. But I have that moment in time frozen because there's no rushing around, really. There's nobody there. That puck came to him. It was fate.
And Christian swings around his own goal and out to center. And Schneider with a long shot. Good save by Michigan. Off his hands to the far corner. Pavlich comes over. It's knocked down. Eruzione shoots! Scores! Eruzione has scored, and the United States leads it 4-3. They are going crazy. Eruzione from about 20 feet has given the United States the lead.
Absolute hysteria from that point on for the last 10 minutes. total hysteria.
And by the way, the first lead of the game for the Americans. So what is more amazing that, the Americans were slowly dismantling this Russian machine, and despite trailing throughout the entire game, they still find a way. They find that one little crack in the Russian defense for Eruzione to get the go-ahead goal. And then I'm sure that the 10 minutes that are left, the place is going nuts, but it had to feel like the longest 10 minutes you've ever witnessed at a sporting event.
Well, the U.S. had one chance to win that game, that shot. They had that one chance, and they buried it. And so that's what was so amazing about it, It was just fate. And so, okay, 10 minutes to go. Now it's like, are you kidding? The U.S. is protecting a one-goal lead now in this game with 10 minutes to go? Can this possibly be? Is it possible to protect a one-goal lead against this team for 10 minutes? Because everyone expected the Soviets now are going to, okay, step on the gas. Okay, boys, let's go. We played with these kids long enough. Let's put them away now. And so they did step on the gas. But Jim Craig was back there. Jim Craig stood on his head. He stood on his left side. He stood on his shoulder. He stood on his helmet. He stood on his stick. He stood on everything. And he just kept knocking pucks up into the stands. The defense, they were clearing pucks. One hit the post. It was under siege. It was like being under siege for the last 10 minutes.
And listening to your call, you get to the last 10 seconds. You just say, can they just clear the zone? Can they just keep the Soviets out here? The final seconds of the game, you said earlier that you're not Al Michaels. You've got a different perspective. And I think your perspective is one of many fans. You get down to the final few seconds and you're not counting it down. You're screaming it down like anybody else in the arena. And you go crazy when everybody else goes crazy. And I'm sure that the goosebumps are back when you're thinking about it now. This was just
right now.
This was a
right
sports fan's moment, an American's moment, a hockey fan's moment. This was all just coming all together at once for you.
It was relief. It was just mad happiness. It was that moment that we talked about earlier that this entire country craved. We craved a moment like that where we could just bond, pull together, feel proud of ourselves just for a moment. And of course, that sense of pride over that victory has lasted another, 8 years since. That was a moment of pride that will last forever. But it was what every citizen in this country needed to happen at that moment so they could just turn and hug the person next to them, even if you didn't know who that person was.
20 seconds to play. Mark Johnson for the U.S. Behind his own net. Ramsey. Big collision between Ramsey and Villarino. McConaughey comes over. Puck is free. 10 seconds to play. If they can clear it here. 4, 3, 2, 1. It is over. The U.S. has beaten Russia. Going crazy out there and jumping up and down, while the Russians, on the other hand, are just standing quietly at their own blue line in a group, watching the celebration. And what a celebration it is! What a hockey game! What a game played by Jim Craig and every member of this USA team! If they can beat Finland, now they win the gold medal.
Now, as you mentioned, that wasn't the gold medal game. They still had to beat Finland, and the Finns were leading in the third period too, and then the U.S. rallied for the win for the gold medal. Obviously, that game against Russia, suddenly, if you weren't interested in the hockey tournament, you were thrust into it, and all of a sudden it went to center stage for that Olympic game. But for you, what was going on with the gold medal game with Finland a couple days later?
Yeah, well, as you said, they had to win that game to win the gold. Everybody was worried about a letdown. And I never actually thought about this before, but as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking like, I went to that game and I did not do the play-by-play of that game into my cassette recorder. Isn't that amazing? I mean, how could you? Why would you,
It's a tough follow-up.
Even if they do win the gold medal, even if they do beat Finland to win the gold medal, that's not the moment. And even we look back at it now, almost 4 decades later, and we can see in retrospect how the Russian game was the moment, not the Finland game. But even there, at that time, a couple of days later, in Lake Placid in 1980, everyone knew that was not the moment. The real moment was the Russia game. Although, if they don't win the gold medal, the Russia game loses its significance because it's on the road to what? A silver or a bronze?
Mm-hmm.
No. It had to be on the road to a gold. So they had to beat Finland. They had to finish the job. But still, they had to beat Finland just to validate that Russian victory as the greatest moment of the 20th century.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, and Mike Eruzione said this, and it was portrayed in the movie Miracle. After the second period, down 2-1, Herb Brooks said, "If you lose this game, you take it to your effing graves." So that's a pretty good motivational speech. It's like, yeah, boys, come on, let's do it. But in terms of the storytelling, you're right. We remember the Miracle on Ice for the U.S.-Russia game. Even if we go back to Al Michaels' call of it. When U.S. wins gold, it's not, do you believe in miracles? It's right. This impossible dream has come true. It's a great call, but it's not at that same level. So you're right, there's expectation. You have to get the win or else, but at the same time, it's such a hard act to follow a couple days after the Russia matchup. Very, very difficult. I mean, imagine the high. Imagine the emotions after, we experienced it as fans and American citizens. Imagine what it was like to be actually lacing them up in the red, white, and blue and actually beating that Russian team. Now you got to get up for it, and you got to get out there, and you got to beat these Finns. And they're a great team too. They're trying to take the gold medal. They don't care that you beat Russia. They could care less. They want the gold medal. And like you said, the U.S. had a rally in the third period because it was a little bit of a letdown to skate into that game, and they had to pull it out. Thanks to Herb Brooks' speech there between periods 2 and 3, they had to pull it out, and Herbie knew exactly what to say. And fortunately, they got the job done and got that gold medal and made this story one that we can still talk about 38 years later. And I don't tell the story to too many people because I don't know what the statute of limitations for trespassing is. But back in 2006, I got married, and my wife and I, we kind of split our honeymoon over 1 week. We spent some time in Lake George and the rest of the week in Toronto. And we decided one day, let's take a road trip to Lake Placid. It was like an hour and a half from where we were staying. So, okay, it's not a direct line. As you know, it's up and down a lot of mountains and hillsides to get there. But, we get there and we've got to go to the Olympic rink. So a lot of people don't know there's actually 2 hockey rinks. There's one from the 1932 Olympics, and then the 1980 rink is connected to it. And we thought, all right, we'll just put down $10 or whatever, get a tour of the place. Well, we walk into the building. There's nobody there taking tickets. There's nobody taking money. There's nobody giving tour guides. So we're just wandering throughout this arena, and we end up at the rink. And there's nobody in the rink. So what do we 2 young, crazy lovers decide to do? We walk down the steps onto the bench, and then we just walk out onto the ice. And isn't that incredible? We're taking pictures of us and I'm standing where Eruzione takes that shot for the 4th goal. And I'm looking around first nervously because I want to make sure security isn't going to throw us out. But second, I'm looking around going, this place is a lot smaller than I'd imagine it. But you can still feel the energy from that series, and of course that game against Russia. It's there, and this is something that was decades later we experienced. Curt Chaplin joining us on the Power Play podcast. Just a couple more questions for you, Curt, and I appreciate your time today. A lot of great stories being shared here from your experience. And this experience, how did that propel you professionally? Because, granted, you had already been in the broadcast business for several years. You were already an employee of ABC Radio. But you would go on to do a lot of great things in doing voiceover work, in working on the People's Court for nearly 20 years. How did this kind of push you in your career in the forefront? Or did it because nobody really knew that you were sitting there with a tape recorder that day?
Right. Well, at any time, I've been in broadcasting now. I got into broadcasting in 1975, so it was 5 years into my career. It was like it was my second job in broadcasting. It was my third job in broadcasting at ABC. So I was 3 jobs into broadcasting, and that's how broadcasting is. You bounce around, you get fired, you get hired, you get fired. That's how you move along in this business. So I was at my third place, and you're right. I would go on to do a lot. I've been in broadcasting so many years. I do a lot of commercials now. I do a lot of voiceovers. I did the People's Court. I did morning radio in New York City. I narrate a lot of documentaries for Major League Baseball and other people. I do a lot of stuff. And still, of everything I've done, and I've done a lot. I've done it all. Anytime I tell people, anytime you can tell someone, I was at the Miracle on Ice game in 1980 in Lake Placid. First of all, they don't even believe it because they've never met anybody who was actually at the game before.
Everybody claims to be there. There's a million people who say they were there, yeah.
Everyone saw Bobby Thompson's home run. They were all there that day.
Of course.
The whole world. But to say that, and when the person looks at you and it hits them that this guy was at the Miracle on Ice, he was there, it's instant respect. It's instant respect for any broadcaster at that point, and especially when I say, and I did a play-by-play version of the game, the Lost Lennon Tapes version of the game. I did that. Yeah, right. So after that, maybe it gave me confidence. You know what it did? When I talk to kids about it, I talk about that moment, not to glorify myself or to be there. I tell them that's an example of fighting your way. And if you fight hard enough, you'll find yourself in the right place at the right time in any field. But you have to fight, and you have to claw your way up, and you have to never quit. And if you exemplify those kinds of character traits, you will find yourself, at your Miracle on Ice at some point in your career. And when you do find yourself in the right place at the right time, take advantage of it. So that's kind of how I use being at that game as a motivational speech for others, And I guess it motivated me too to gave me a little bit of confidence to go on and to continue to fight my way up the ladder too.
And lastly, that fight to be in that position, to be in that moment, and that's a further extension. You weren't just at the game, you have proof. Here it is. That proof is in the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto.
Oh.
That's being a hockey fan, that's got to be, other than having your name on the Stanley Cup, just being in the Hall of Fame, that's got to be an incredible honor for you.
Yeah, Matt. Again, you're making the hair on my arm stand up, and I really appreciate you saying that. I know it's, I can't believe it. To say that is to be able to say that as something, an artifact of mine is in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Look, when all is said and done about my career or whoever I am, and I'm a dad too. I have 2 kids too, who 2 wonderful kids and a wife and 2 wonderful kids. My son played a little bit in the minor leagues for the Dodgers. My daughter is married to a gentleman who is in the Army Special Forces, and I'm very proud of all those aspects of my life, more than any other aspect. But when it all comes right down to it, on the headstone, on the epitaph, here lies a hockey fan. That's who I am. I'm just a hockey fan, like the rest of us, like everyone listening to this broadcast right now, like you and everyone we've talked about during this conversation. I'm just a hockey fan at heart. And so for them to have accepted that as an exhibit in the Hockey Hall of Fame, I mean, I can die happy.
And now they're lining up and shaking hands. A man is running out with the U.S. flag. People jumping on the ice here. And the U.S. team raises its sticks in salute to the crowd, who screams right back at him. Still a celebration among some of the U.S. players. They're hugging each other. They can't believe it. They're holding their heads. They're throwing their sticks all over the place, hugging, kissing, words of congratulations all around, and they earned every last word. Listen to this crowd. And there they go, filing off to their dressing room. This capacity crowd has seen the most exciting event here at the 13th Winter Olympics.
It's true. Millions of people say they were at that Miracle on Ice game, even though the arena in Lake Placid only holds 8,500 seats. But Curt Chaplin was there, crouched under a camera with a tape recorder in hand, catching one of the greatest moments in sports history. He wasn't assigned to be there, and nobody knew how that game was going to play out. Yet he picked one hell of a time to record his only hockey play-by-play experience. My thanks to Curt Chaplin for joining me this week, and thanks to you for listening. I'm Matt Salmon, the host of the Power Play Podcast. Join us next Thursday for a brand new episode from Lightning Radio.
Access all episodes of Lightning Radio's Power Play at TampaBayLightning.com and follow the Lightning Radio Network on Facebook and Twitter at Bolts Radio. This is Lightning Radio. Lightning Radio.